Your brain is the most energy-hungry organ in your body, consuming roughly 20% of your daily calories despite being only 2% of your weight. Yet, most people drain this precious mental fuel on things that offer zero return, leaving them exhausted, unfocused, and stuck. If you're serious about peak performance, focus, and emotional resilience, you need to ruthlessly eliminate these 6 mental energy vampires. You create cognitive load. Your working memory gets clogged with social calculations instead of creative or strategic thinking. Research on high performers shows they're not immune to social pressure. They simply have stronger cognitive filters that screen out irrelevant opinions. They ask one question, asterisk, does this person's judgment have actual consequences for my goals? If not, their opinion gets neurologically categorized as noise, not data. When you harbor grudges, your brain remains stuck in a defensive loop, perpetually rehearsing past injuries as if they're still happening. Neuroimaging studies show that recalling past betrayals or injustices activates the same neural pathways as physical pain, triggering a cascade of stress hormones and inflammatory responses. This isn't just emotionally draining, it's biologically costly. What we call multitasking is really just rapid task switching, and each switch comes with a severe neurological tax. Studies using fMRI scans show that when you attempt to focus on multiple tasks, your brain doesn't engage in parallel processing. Instead, it must disengage from one neural network and activate an entirely separate one each time you shift attention. This transition isn't seamless. It creates what neuroscientists call switch costs. This isn't just unproductive, it's neurologically costly. When you fixate on things outside your control, your body floods with cortisol and adrenaline, activating the same stress response as facing a physical threat. Over time, this chronic state of alarm impairs cognitive function, weakens immune response, and even shrinks the hippocampus, the brain region critical for memory and learning. This satisfies the brain's need to scan for danger while preventing rumination loops. Another effective strategy is temporal distancing. When anxiety about tomorrow strikes, ask yourself, will this matter in 5 years? This simple question activates the prefrontal cortex, overriding emotional hijacking. Your brain is a prediction machine, but it's notoriously bad at accurate forecasting. Studies show that 85% of what people worry about never happens, and the remaining 15% is typically handled the region responsible for rational decision-making. This isn't spiritual advice, it's neurological optimization. The process begins with recognizing that your brain can't simultaneously prepare for future success and remain anchored to past injuries. One technique used in cognitive behavioral therapy is the empty chair exercise. Articulate your grievance fully, then consciously declare it closed. This ritual provides the closure your brain craves, allowing it to reallocate those mental resources. The productivity killer isn't just the obvious cases of texting while working, it's the subtle background drains, checking email while on a call, browsing news tabs during a meeting, or mentally rehearsing your next conversation while someone is speaking to you. Each split focus forces your brain into what's called attentional residue, where part of your cognitive capacity remains stuck on the previous task, degrading performance on your current one. The most pragmatic minds treat resentment like a broken algorithm, a faulty mental program that needs deleting. They understand that every minute spent nurturing old wounds is a minute stolen from building future victories. Emotional resilience isn't about never getting hurt. It's about refusing to let yesterday's conflicts dictate today's cognitive capacity. When you release resentment, you're not doing it for the other person, you're doing it to reclaim your brain's full processing power. The more you feed those circuits, the stronger they become, making it easier to slip into rumination and harder to break free. Think of it like a muscle. If you train your brain to obsess over what you should have said or done, that neural pathway thickens, firing faster and more automatically. Meanwhile, the pathways for forward-thinking problem-solving weaken from neglect. The key insight? Stress isn't about external events. It's about perceived lack of control. Studies on locus of control show that people who focus their energy on actionable factors, no matter how small, maintain lower stress levels and higher resilience than those paralyzed by uncertainty. The brain rewards agency. Even in chaotic situations, identifying just one lever you can pull, whether it's preparing for multiple outcomes or simply regulating your breathing, The irony, the more you chase validation, the more you erode genuine confidence, which can only be built through self-reference standards. Neuroimaging studies reveal something fascinating. When people act in ways that align with their core values, regardless of external opinion, they show increased activity in the ventromedial prefrontal cortex, an area associated with authentic decision-making and emotional resilience. The brain's default mode network, the circuitry that activates when you're not focused on the external world, loves to drag you backward. It replays awkward conversations, past failures, and missed opportunities on a loop, as if analyzing them one more time will somehow rewrite history. But here's the brutal truth. Neuroplasticity means every minute spent dwelling on the past isn't just wasted. It actively rewires your brain for regret, not growth. The brain's ability to simulate future scenarios is one of humanity's greatest evolutionary advantages. Yet when left unchecked, it becomes a relentless source of needless suffering. Catastrophizing about hypothetical disasters triggers the same physiological stress response as actual events, flooding your system with cortisol and adrenaline for threats that may never materialize. The athletes who consistently choke are those whose brains default to "what if I fail?" simulations, while peak performers train their minds to focus exclusively on the next actionable step. The solution isn't to suppress future-oriented thinking, but to channel it productively. High performers use a technique called contingency planning. They briefly acknowledge potential obstacles, then immediately pivot to solution pathways. The act alone reduces anxiety by externalizing chaotic thoughts. Next, apply the 10% rule. If you can't change at least 10% of the outcome, it's mental deadweight. Redirect that energy toward variables you can impact. The deeper truth? Worrying about uncontrollable is often a disguised form of procrastination. It feels productive because it mimics problem solving, but it's just mental wheel spinning. The antidote is ruthless prioritization of attention. Every minute spent agonizing over a flight delay or someone else's opinion is a minute stolen from high-leverage action. Train your brain to default to the question, where can I apply leverage right now? That's the foundation of real mental stamina. The craving for external validation is one of the most insidious drains on mental energy. A neurological trap disguised as social necessity. Shifts the nervous system out of panic mode. This isn't theoretical. Research on elite performers, from surgeons to athletes, reveals they don't lack stress. They compartmentalize it. They distinguish between uncontrollable weather, competitors, market shifts, and controllable preparation, mindset, effort. The latter gets 100% of their focus. You can train this skill. Start by writing down worries, then categorizing them. Circle what you can influence, cross out what you can't. Research from Stanford reveals heavy multitasks actually perform worse on cognitive tests than their single-tasking counterparts, with impaired memory retention and reduced ability to filter out irrelevant information. The constant context switching trains your brain to crave distraction, eroding your capacity for sustained concentration. Even worse, this fractured attention state elevates stress hormones, creating a vicious cycle where you feel increasingly overwhelmed while accomplishing less. Over time, you'll notice something counterintuitive. Working on fewer things simultaneously actually allows you to complete more high-quality work. Your brain wasn't built for fragmentation. It thrives on undivided engagement. The most productive minds aren't those that juggle many tasks, but those that fully inhabit one task at a time. Holding on to resentment is like drinking poison and expecting the other person to suffer. The only real casualty is your own mental clarity. Leaving less mental bandwidth for creativity, focus, and strategic planning. It's why people stuck in analysis paralysis often feel mentally exhausted, yet accomplish little. The past is a data source, not a home. Review mistakes once, extract the lesson, then redirect that energy toward behaviors that move the needle. The fix isn't positive thinking, it's present thinking. Interrupt rumination with sensory anchoring. Its tendency to overweight potential threats while underestimating your capacity to handle them. When you fixate on worst-case scenarios, you're not engaging in rational planning. You're essentially practicing failure, reinforcing neural pathways that associate the future with danger. Research on Olympic athletes shows that the key difference between elite performers and chronic underachievers isn't skill level, it's their ability to stay present under pressure. Hit it once reserved for external approval. The ultimate shift comes when you realize seeking approval doesn't make people like you more, it makes you respect yourself less. Confidence isn't the absence of doubt, it's the presence of self-authority, even when doubt shows up. The myth of multitasking as a productivity superpower is one of the most damaging illusions in modern cognitive culture. High performers don't have better brains. They simply protect their attention more ruthlessly. They understand that real productivity comes from sequential focus, not parallel processing. The solution lies in training your brain for monotasking. Start with attention blocks, dedicated 25-45-minute windows where you engage with a single task while eliminating all potential switches. Use physical cues, closed-door, noise-canceling headphones to signal focus time to your nervous system. 5 seconds of focused breathing, or physically gripping an object to force awareness into the now. Over time, this trains the brain to disengage from unproductive loops. Another tactic: schedule worry time, a 10-minute window to analyze the past deliberately, then shut it down. This contains the mental sprawl while honoring the brain's itch to process. Far better than anticipated. The mental energy wasted on imaginary disasters is staggering energy that could be invested in skill building, relationship cultivation, or actual problem solving. Presence isn't about ignoring the future. It's about engaging with it from a position of strength rather than fear. Train your brain to distinguish between prudent preparation and pointless panic, and you'll reclaim one of your most valuable cognitive resources: calm, focused attention. Every time you alter your behavior to please others or seek approval, you're not just expending cognitive effort, you're handing over your brain's reward system to outside forces. Here's how it works. When someone praises or validates you, your brain releases dopamine, reinforcing the behavior that earned that approval. Over time, this creates a dependency loop where your sense of worth becomes tied to external feedback. Conversely, when making choices based on others' expectations, the amygdala, the brain's fear center, lights up, indicating stress and conflict. This explains why people pleasers often feel exhausted. They're constantly in a state of low-grade neurological conflict, suppressing their instincts to meet external demands. The mental tax goes deeper. Each time you filter your actions through "what will they think?" Chronic resentment keeps your sympathetic nervous system engaged, elevating cortisol levels and suppressing immune function over time. The bitter irony: the person you're resenting likely isn't wasting a single neuron thinking about you, while you're sacrificing precious cognitive real estate to maintain your outrage. The brain's memory systems are designed to prioritize emotionally charged events. It's an evolutionary survival mechanism. But when you continually revisit old wounds, you strengthen those neural connections, making them easier to trigger and harder to ignore. This creates what psychologists call a hostility bias, where you start interpreting neutral events through the lens of past conflicts, seeing threats where none exist. Research on workplace dynamics reveals that employees who hold on to grudges perform 20 to 30% worse on cognitive tasks than their peers. Breaking this cycle requires retraining your brain's reward system. Start small. Make one inconsequential decision daily based purely on your preference: what to eat, what to wear, without seeking input. Notice how uncomfortable it feels initially. That's your dopamine system protesting the lack of external reinforcement. Over time, as you build a track record of trusting your own judgment, your brain begins to reward self-validated actions with the same dopamine. Bottom line, mental energy invested in the past is a tax on your future. The most resilient minds don't avoid reflection, they refuse to live there. The human brain evolved to detect threats. It's wired to scan for uncertainty and latch onto worst-case scenarios. But in the modern world, where existential threats are rare, this survival mechanism backfires. We burn mental fuel obsessing over hypothetical disasters, uncontrollable events, and outcomes we can't influence. Research shows excessive rumination correlates with decreased activity in the prefrontal cortex, the region responsible for decision-making and emotional regulation, while amplifying activity in the amygdala, the fear center. The result? A brain optimized for anxiety, not action. Even worse, this mental habit drains glucose, the brain's primary fuel, at an alarming rate. Studies on cognitive load reveal that repetitive negative thinking depletes working memory. Neuroimaging studies reveal that anxiety about imagined futures activates the amygdala with nearly identical intensity as real-time dangers, hijacking cognitive resources that should be devoted to present-moment problem solving. This future tripping doesn't prepare you for challenges, it simply exhausts your mental reserves before you ever encounter them. What makes this particularly insidious is the brain's negativity bias, micro moments of cognitive lag where mental performance drops. Over the course of a day, these micro-lags accumulate into significant drains on both time and mental energy. The prefrontal cortex, your brain's executive control center, was designed for deep focus, not fragmentation. When forced to constantly redirect attention, it burns through glucose at an accelerated rate, leading to the familiar feeling of mental exhaustion despite minimal actual output, as their working memory gets clogged with unresolved emotional static. The resentment itself becomes a cognitive tax, siphoning mental energy away from present moment problem solving. Forgiveness isn't about excusing bad behavior, it's a strategic neural reset. Studies on forgiveness interventions show that when subjects consciously release resentment, they experience immediate reductions in physiological stress markers, along with increased activity in the prefrontal cortex